Hey, I'm James from Soak That Barbecue, and today I'm on a quest to find out which small Kamado is best. Let's get into it. So I love my small Kamados, and I'm really looking forward to today's test because all three of these small Kamados claim to be the best in the business. So how are we going to separate some marketing facts from some reality-based tests? So speaking of those tests, I've picked up a couple of proteins to help illustrate the differences on cooking between these three small Kamados. First, I've spatchcocked 3 chickens and let those salt dry brine overnight so we can test the indirect cooking efficiency of something like a spatchcocked chicken and see if there's any areas that are exposed to the direct heat below, or if there's a workable surface to be able to cook something like a spatchcocked chicken. Next, I also had a leftover New York strip roast, so I've sliced out a couple steaks and also dry brined those overnight so we can do a reverse sear to a direct sear grilling. And this is going to not only show us the usability of switching modes on grills that don't have a divide and conquer rack system where we can have 2 different zone cooking. We actually have to get in and handle our hot deflector plates, but it also brings me back to an experience starting with my MiniMax. This is my original MiniMax I've had for over 10 years, and my bias, I think, for some reason, it just stands to me as the best looking small Kamado in the group. Whether it's the packaging, the color, the nest, it is awesome just to look at. But when I took it camping with me and I want to set it on a table like we have here today on a picnic table or something like that, I actually almost nearly caused a fire in the park doing a reverse seared steak. I later tested this when I did my Big Green Egg versus my Kamado Joe Jr. by placing a piece of toast underneath, and at searing temperatures, I was cooking, if not burning, the toast. And so the proximity to the surface underneath is something that I learned is really important. So we're going to do a bit of that test again today with the steaks to see again what sort of temperature or conditions are ideal for using these Kamados on the road if that happens to be something that you're interested in testing. And speaking of on the road, we'll also go through some of the specs. I'll put them up on the side so I don't misquote you and get anything wrong. But first one I think that matters here is price. So the Akorn Jr. it starts at I think $170 US plus $40 for the deflector stone that's not included. So you're $210 for our least expensive option, going all the way up to you could have 3.5 of the acorns for the price of the MiniMax with the egg convector in order to be able to do that indirect cooking, just over $700 US. And the Joe Jr. sort of falls in the middle of the price range at $499 US, and it comes with the included heat deflector, grill gripper, and ash tool. Speaking of specs, let's start with our smallest and most expensive, the Big Green Egg MiniMax. This has a 13-inch cooking grid, which gives us just over 130 square inches of cooking space, and I believe we're at 77 pounds in terms of the total weight. The Joe Jr. gains just a little bit more, 13.5-inch cooking space is the claim here, and that works out to 150 inches, and we are 77 pounds. So both the Big Green Egg and the Joe Jr. are within a pound of each other, and I can vouch from having to carry them small, short distances is as far as you want to go with either of these grills. It's not so bad with all the components out, but you have a heat deflector or anything in there, this gets heavy quick. So even a short trip down to the beach can become a little bit too daunting, which is what led me to get my Akorn Jr. for camping. Not only was I a little bit overprotective from theft, a little bit worried about storage and jostling around in the back of a pickup truck, but really the weight was one of the key deciding factors to pick up the Akorn Jr. for this summer's camping trip. So the weight on the Akorn Jr. is half of the other two, or a little bit less than half at 32 pounds, and it's also the largest. So at a 14-inch cooking grid, this gives us 155 square inches of cooking space. So how do all those differences play out in terms of the performance of each grill? Only one way to find out. Let's get into our head-to-head. Okay, let's start with an overview of each of our grills. If I show you the 3 cooking grids overlaid in the Akorn, which is the largest, you can see that maybe the distance in the 13 all the way up to the 14-inch grid is maybe the equivalent of a chicken wing. In fact, since the Big Green Egg is our smallest and the Akorn grid is our largest at 14 inches, you can see I can actually even drop the 14-inch grid no problem in the MiniMax. So I wouldn't really say there's a size difference in terms of cooking capacity. They've just chosen to get a little bit closer to the outside perimeter for those claims, but the cooking grids, they are interchangeable. They fit in all 3. Where the physical dimensions actually do start to show up though are in a few areas. First is the distance between the heat deflector plate and our cooking grid, where the Big Green Egg MiniMax is just less than an inch. The other part that often is really important is the distance between the fire underneath and our heat deflector plate. You'll notice both on the MiniMax and my Kamado Joe Jr, I've bought things like the Kick Ash basket. I'm a huge fan of a basket in a small Kamado because when you are out on the road and if you need to pack this grill up, leaving a hot burning fire in here, these things will take forever to cool off. So if you have some high heat gloves or tools to be able to remove your fire, clean out your Kamado and let it cool off so you can actually transport it, that makes a big difference. So both the MiniMax and the Kamado Joe Jr have the Kick Ash basket. Let me go show you inside the Junior. Okay, let's take a look inside of the Joe Jr. Now the Joe Jr heat deflector plate has a couple options in terms of if it's in the low position, which it is in right now, which instead of an inch is giving me right on the line 3 inches of distance. Alternatively, if I wanted to have a little bit more clearance above our fire, I could take the deflector stone and place it up top and get the exact same, you know, kind of less than an inch clearance that the MiniMax has, but this would allow for something like a pizza setup where we want maybe more heat coming up and above. This part's the same. This is like the Kick Ash basket, as I mentioned, I like for all my small Kamados. This is, again, so we can shake it out, clean up our grill, and or remove the heat. Speaking of clean up our grill, let me show you the one extra part I've just got. So also from Kick Ash basket is their Kick Ash can product, and so this sits right down in the base of the Kamado, and it allows us to pull this out when we have our ash and just dump that versus needing to either scoop by hand or use the little ash tool. If your grill was all together, just imagine again, you're reaching in with the ash tool and you're trying to find your way around, not being able to see anything and scrape out most of the ash. On the bigger Kamados, Kamado Joe has the deflector wings, which help direct some of the ash down into their pull-out ash drawer, which the Joe Jr does not have. But I'm not really, again, a fan of that system because it sits underneath the firebox and ash tends to build up behind it. So I do like things like this because I get 100% of the ash and it turns my Joe Jr into a similar experience where I have an easy to remove ash system. Let's go take a look at our Akorn. Our Akorn looks to be in the middle of the two. If the Big Green Egg MiniMax was just over an inch, the Akorn has just exactly 2 inches, so it is right in the middle. So the distance from the deflector plate on the MiniMax, 1 inches, Joe Jr 3 inches, and the Akorn Jr at 2 inches. And I don't believe they make, and I haven't seen it yet, but I don't have an ash removal basket like I do on the other two. But you are able to remove the Akorn Jr similarly to an ash basket where you have the bottom charcoal grate and take this and set it in your fire pit to help cool down. So it gives us a little bit of that same utility. So I've done a quick overview on some of the distances that I think will impact our food. Let's add some charcoal, start some fires, get ready for our cook. I'm going to be using Fogo Black in each of our Kamados because the sizes are a little bit smaller compared to the gold bag. In all of our Kamados, we want to make sure that we don't have any charcoal touching the bottom of our heat deflector plate, as that will make it difficult to get enough air for that fire to burn nice and clean. Let's get our Grill Blazer grill gun, start our first fire. Drop in our Akorn Jr heat deflector stone, our cooking grid, and we'll close this up and open our vent all the way for now until we start to come up to temperature. We're going to be doing our chicken at 350 degrees Fahrenheit is the goal. Let's go set up our Joe Jr. Add our basket back in, some Fogo Black, fire it up again. Drop in our Kamado Joe heat deflector plate and cooking grid, and open my smokeware cap all the way. You'll notice both on the Green Egg and the Joe Jr. I have a smokeware cap. There isn't an option for the Akorn Jr. as it's not the same size base. I like the smokeware cap because when I take my small Kamados out and if it rains, I don't have any water coming in. Plus, when you open and close your vent, the top doesn't move and you never lose your temperature settings versus the daisy wheel design that the Joe Jr. has and the original MiniMax has, although they now have the regulator, which doesn't slide, which is really nice, but I already had the cap for it, so that's what we're going with on both of those. All right, last but not least, let's add some coal to our MiniMax and start our fire. Install our egg convector, making sure again that it's not sitting on any charcoal on the bottom, and our cooking grid. Let this come up to temperature. And again, open our smokeware vent cap.
Okay, I've got our 3 birds ready to go, and as you can tell, I spatchcocked these yesterday. You could use a pair of kitchen scissors or a knife. I have a Dow Strong Chef knife. It makes quick work just to run down the spine. I didn't go to the trouble of removing the cartilage because, again, I really just want to focus on the cooking on the bottom as well as the render on the top. So let's go for probes. I've got my meter probe number 1, so I'll put this over in the breast of the Big Green Egg chicken. Probe number 2 into the middle one here, which I guess we'll do in the Kamado Joe chicken. And probe number 3, last one over here for the acorn. Okay, let's get those on. Start with Big Green Egg, our Joe Jr., and last but not least, our Akorn Jr.
Okay, we've got all 3 chickens on our small Kamados. You can also see I placed a piece of bread underneath each one. There's really nothing going on under the acorn. A little bit of heat going on under the junior, and I don't want to get my hand under that close distance on the Big Green Egg. So this will just again give us a sense of the radiant heat being transferred from our Kamado to whatever surface we're on. I'm just going to leave that there for the entire cook on the chicken and the steak. We'll check back at the end to see if that makes any difference. Speaking of differences, just while we're loading the chickens on, I don't know if this will make a difference in the cook, but there's definitely some things that you can appreciate in terms of loading them in. So in terms of fit, feel, and finish, Big Green Egg here, I think, is ahead in terms of a premium feel. I love the acacia wood handle. This just has a really nice premium feel, and at the price of the Big Green Egg MiniMax being the highest in this test, I would hope that it has some of those features, along with the mesh ash guard at the bottom vent where we're adjusting our temperatures. This just helps make sure that no hot coals or embers fall out. So a nice fit and finish for the Big Green Egg. In terms of the Kamado Joe Jr., I've never had some coal fallout here. Even though that was something I was a little bit originally worried about, it hasn't happened, and so maybe a little bit unwarranted in terms of fear. Would be nice if we had that. And we have, of course, the plastic handle. It's great having owned both the wood and the plastic handle. The longevity is no doubt an advantage of the plastic handle. You don't have to worry about winter, rain, seasoning, and maintaining the acacia. I'm just a huge fan of acacia, and I like the premium feel that it has. And then coming in the least expensive option, also with the least expensive fit and finish, is our Akorn Jr, where we've got this latch system we can use either when we're cooking or definitely transporting it to help prevent our lid from falling open. But as you can see there, it didn't come perfectly aligned, and so it takes a little bit of force. It gets a lot of heat, and I nearly burnt myself touching that because it absorbs a lot of the energy. So using high heat gloves when you're working with either of these grills is a good idea, but particularly when fussing with the latch system. So game plan right now is just to let these chickens cook. I put the meter probes in, set them up on the app to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just so I can keep track where they are. I'll likely pull them for the breast a little bit closer to 155 and let them rest, so long as the dark meat is hitting 165 when it's time to slice into them. We'll be looking for doneness on the bottom. I'm not going to do any of the things that you would do if you owned one of these grills to try and get the best possible result in terms of placing it higher in the domes, spraying it with maybe some butter or something like that to help crisp up the skin. I really just want to not this be sort of my best foot forward on chicken, but evaluating how each grill's dome radiates energy as well as how the heat deflectors work. And I won't be able to see that if I mask it with a couple of those other tips and tricks. Be sure to check out any of my 101 videos for all the tips and tricks if you own any of these grills on the little things that you can do along the way to get a better result. But today is about comparing the grill and how it performs as a grill versus us as a pitmaster throwing everything we can to accommodate any little nuances or differences on the grill that we're cooking with. I'll see you in about an hour when these chickens are ready. Okay, let's start with our chicken taste test, starting with the MiniMax. So the MiniMax tastes exactly how it looks. That's a nice, moist, juicy chicken breast that we will get from the dry brine. The skin is nothing spectacular. It's not overdone, it's not underdone, it's not soggy. But if anything, it's maybe not completely rendered. There was a little bit of grizzle underneath the skin when I bit into it. It's just like that could have used maybe a little bit more top-down heat to crisp up the skin and render a little bit of that fat. Let's try our Joe Jr. chicken. So this here, you even see when I was slicing it, the skin is wanting to fall off and yet is still crispy. I don't know if you can hear the sort of the scratching sound. So it's crispy but not wanting to stay stuck to our chicken breast. Let's try that. So the chicken part, identical. Really, as you can see visually, the only difference is the skin.
And like I was saying on the Big Green Egg one, where it could have used a little bit more time, that's, I think, exactly what we got here. So we're getting a little bit more top-down radiant heat, which I'm honestly surprised about, just looking at the dimensions of the Big Green Egg and how close it is in proximity to the fire, as well as the dome shape. But they all move air differently inside of the Kamado, and in this case, I like the crispiness of the skin a little bit better on the Joe Jr. Let's try the Akorn. Similarly, the skin's wanting to slide off of the breast like the Junior, but it's sort of in the middle in terms of the feel and crispiness. Let's try that. So the protein's identical. Honestly, don't know why we chose to do a taste test. The proteins taste the same, and everything that we thought we'd see or taste from the look, it's kind of exactly how it tastes. So that is right in the middle of the Big Green Egg MiniMax and the Joe Jr. for rendering fat. But now that we know a little bit more about how the heat and smoke and air is circulating inside of our grills, let's get our steaks out of there, overnight dry brine, and start with a reverse sear. I'll meet you back out here once I've washed off the meter probes. We're going to use them again and start up our steaks. Okay, our New York strip steaks have come out of the overnight dry brine. I've got these three side by side as they are the most even in thickness. This one, not sure you can come through on camera, but it's about a finger's width less deep. So I'm going to save that for another cook. And just like before, we'll go with the meter probes in number 1, number 2, and number 3. Just a touch of truff hot sauce as a binder on each. Dab will do. Just a little bit of garlic. And last but not least, some fresh cracked black pepper. Go for a little bit coarser. All right, get our steaks on for the first part of the reverse sear. Okay, let's set up our Junior for the sear. One thing I do like about the Kamado is it comes with these grill grippers that make it easy to remove our grid without burning. Remove this, swap places, and now I can go set this in another grill or on the concrete to let it cool off. So the MiniMax doesn't come with tools since I have the Kamado ones. I'm just going to borrow those, make it a little bit easier to do the swap here, and then using some high heat gloves, remove our convector, drop that back in, and again store this with an air gap on concrete. You don't want to put it on cold concrete as it'll crack when it's this hot, or a spare grill. This is going in my Big Joe. So the Akorn does include a tool. Let's lift our grid out, remove our heat deflector, swap places again, and again I'll go store this safely. Okay, let's sear on our MiniMax. We're up, it was about 550 degrees on the dome. That is one of the limitations of the MiniMax. If you can see down in there the amount of charcoal that's left. So we've done a chicken, which was a little bit less than an hour, and then this reverse seared steak. But we are nearly through at these higher temperatures, coming up to a sear to the point now where we don't have enough BTU left to really get a good sear. So we can add that to our things to consider a little bit later on, is the quantity or the depth of the charcoal basket, and the MiniMax is the smallest of the three. I didn't think it would be an issue on chicken and steak, but looking down in there at the amount of coal that we have left, I definitely think we could use a refill. All right, looks good. Okay, let's do our Junior sear. It's currently the hottest, just about at 800 degrees according to the dome probe. No issues having enough fuel for that sear. Looks good. Let's do our last one. Our Akorn has also plenty of fuel left. It's the most energy efficient, so that doesn't surprise me that there is plenty of coal to work with. Might be an advantage for steak. That's not necessarily ideal for long, low-slow cooks where we're barely using any fuel. But we also, it's the only grid that comes as cast iron, so that might be nice for our sear. My camera didn't like being that close to the open grill and turned off from my heat warning, but going from my left is the Big Green Egg MiniMax, the same order as the grills. Middle is the Kamado Joe Jr. And then on my right is the Char-Griller Akorn. So these two look pretty similar, maybe a little bit more char here because of the cast iron. But let's slice into each one, get a sample, dive in for a taste test, see if there's any differences. Looks like a nice medium rare. Try and move quickly, the camera keeps turning off because of the heat. Again, also looks like a nice medium rare off of our Junior. And finally, our Char-Griller Akorn. And just judging from the band of doneness around the outside, they all look pretty similar to me. So let's see if there's any difference in the taste. All right, let's dive in for our taste test. Start with our Big Green Egg MiniMax. It's gonna be a good day. Next, our Kamado Joe Jr. Cheers. And last but not least, our Char-Griller Akorn. Cheers. Okay, results. Despite 3 identical preparations, these taste remarkably different. So I'm gonna work my way backwards, starting with where I finished with the Char-Griller Akorn, because that's actually the steak I liked the least. And that again can be a user error. That's the temperature of cast iron, but the outside of the crust starting to taste burnt. That's one of the reasons I love the soapstone. I even have a soapstone for my Joe Jr. and I use it in my bigger grills. Cast iron is really sensitive between not enough temperature to get a great crust and then way too much temperature to immediately burn. And that's all that I can taste outside of a glorious steak in the middle on our Char-Griller Akorn. So second place in the steak is the Big Green Egg. This at least tastes like a proper steak. There's nothing burnt, but maybe if we were burnt on the Akorn, we're a little bit lack of a Maillard reaction, particularly on the one side. I was able to get a little bit of a crust forming on the presentation side that you see here on the top, but if I show you a clip flipping it over, there's almost nothing, no sear to speak of. And that, again, is maybe just the grill running out of charcoal and not able to have a large enough basket to be able to get through to cook something like a chicken and a steak and have enough power to bring the grill up to searing temperatures. But that definitely is showing its hand here in terms of the lack of the crust that we're able to get on our New York strip. And moving into my favorite steak, and I wish I could share all 3 of these with you because this really, there's no debate if you're able to taste each one of these. They come through much more loudly and cleanly, and clearly I should say, than the chicken test. And so the Kamado Joe Jr. with the stainless steel grates, I was able to get a bit of a crust. You can see the grid marks, the lines are there, but nothing tastes burnt. Maybe that extra little proximity from the charcoal and the fact that we still had charcoal left in order to power it up and get some higher temperatures. This by far is my favorite steak out of the group. So now that we've done a couple tests, let's take a look at our bread underneath. They've been sitting there all afternoon for our chicken and our steak. See if there's any differences in terms of the residual heat being transferred to our cooking surface. And then we'll dive into some of the results between our chicken or steak, our price and overall performance in terms of which small Kamado should you buy if you happen to be in the market. All right, let's get our pieces of bread. So this is our Char-Griller Akorn. It's definitely gotten crusty, even though it's sitting down here and I could put my hand, that is warm. So we're transferring energy to our table with searing a steak. I could put my hand there without getting burnt, but I would not want to hold it there a long time. And that's enough to get our piece of bread crusty. On our Kamado Joe Jr., actually that's a little bit less hot to the touch, but same sound with our bread. The MiniMax, it's wedged under here a little bit. I need to get some gloves as the handles have gotten too hot to the touch. But if I put them all 3 side by side, we definitely didn't do as bad as my original test where I got the sear a little bit higher because we had enough charcoal. Here we only got to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, as that's all the charcoal we had left from our 2 cooks. And so perhaps that's why this didn't go black. But if you can see the 3 side by side, this is the only one that has started to turn to toast. And again, it's crispy. Really the only difference is a little bit of color. These 2 still look like plain bread, where we actually are toasting the bread underneath. When there is enough charcoal, this is where I've almost set a park bench on fire. So the limitation here on the MiniMax is definitely the clearance to whatever you're putting on. So my strong recommendation is cook on asphalt or something like that, not a wooden table surface, as you will be transferring enough heat, particularly if you have more charcoal, to start a fire. Okay, time for results. And first let me say, if you own one of these small Kamados already, there is not one in this test that offers enough of an advantage in versatility, experience, and overall result that it warrants switching from what you have to a different brand. They are remarkably close. So this is more designed, if you're in the market for a small Kamado, what are some of the things that are different between them? And what are some of the marketing claims that pan out or don't pan out in terms of making an investment in a small Kamado? So starting with the value, hard to argue here at $170 plus the deflector stone for $210 total with the Char-Griller Akorn. This is
a remarkable value. Also, in terms of portability, the reason I have this grill is to take it camping. A, to not be as concerned if it gets stolen at a campsite because of the cost, as well as the portability of getting it in and out of places that we want to grill. So I'm going to give points both for the overall value as well as the portability. Where we're going to lose some points, however, though, with the Char-Griller Akorn is on the quality. Now, I haven't owned it long enough to suffer through the issue of the bottom rusting out, like many people have let me know in the comments. And so while I won't pretend for a second that the Char-Griller Akorn is on a comparable quality to either the Big Green Egg, I've had this for over a decade and it's kicking strong, it's doing great. My Joe Jr. I've had for half a decade, I believe at this point now, I think 2019 if I've got my years right, and it's still going strong. So these two I think have a strong advantage on quality, and if there is an issue, both offer a lifetime warranty on the ceramic component. So if anything catastrophic were to happen in terms of normal use and operation, we're going to be protected by two manufacturers who have lifetime warranties on their ceramic. I will, however, say in terms of the cost, you can have nearly 3.6 or something, if I did the math right, Char-Griller Akorns for the price of one MiniMax. So if it lasts you 5 years, you're going to be about year 17 going on to year 18 before the break even between these two finally does pay off. So by no means do I put it in the same breath on a quality perspective, but you could stock up and buy 3, if not nearly 4 of them right now and just roll out a new one every time it rusts out and something goes wrong before you catch up to the cost of one Big Green Egg MiniMax. I mentioned this earlier, but the look, it looks very subjective, but again, I do find the attractiveness of the packaging on the Big Green Egg MiniMax. It looks great. At least beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. However, this may be a little bit of putting form over function, because the limitations, as we saw with transferring the heat of the grill to what we are cooking, that when you have a full charcoal basket is enough to crack ceramic stones that I've had it on and nearly set park benches on fire. Plus, we don't have the height inside of our grill to manage greater gaps and distances to our stones. So depending on what we're cooking, that can lead to overdone cooking on the bottom. We don't have the same height and clearance in our dome. I've done a full Packer brisket, 13-pound Packer brisket inside of my Kamado Joe Jr. And the only way I could fit that is with a large arc shape. There's just not as much headroom in the Big Green Egg MiniMax to be able to do this. So not only limited in headroom on the top, space and clearance on the bottom in terms of not setting any fires to the park bench or whatever surface that we set it on, but the charcoal basket itself was the smallest, and so it offered the least amount of total run times. And one more in the versatility camp is the sort of the lack of tools. One of the reasons that I did originally give some points to the Kamado Joe Jr. is so much comes out of the box. We get our ash tool, we get our grid grippers for moving grids around, and albeit you can manage all of that with a pair of high heat gloves, or these are not expensive items to add, but when you're starting with the most expensive grill here, it comes with the least amount of versatility. So the Joe Jr., while it may not have some of those premium touches like the acacia wood handle, and for some reason I like the visual look, the packaging of the Big Green Egg, it by far is the most versatile grill here. The rack system allows us to place our deflectors down low for a larger gap in terms of the radiant heat that we're going to be transferring into our food. Up top, if we want to go sort of for a double deflector stone and do pizza or things like that I've done in the grill, we have the most amount of height. And honestly, between these, this is the same size cooking grid as the small Big Green Egg, and I've seen people put a small in a modified egg nest carrier system, and honestly I think that's what Big Green Egg should have done. There's just too many compromises shrinking a small egg down to this form factor for it to be incredibly useful at home or on the road. And so the Akorn, while it may be here for a good time and not a long time, and there are modifications. I forgot to mention this earlier, you may have seen it, but I've added gasket material to the bottom of our removable ash pan as well as on the base of our Kamado and dome to help improve the seal, so I actually have a chance of regulating temperatures. This is the least consistent of the 3 grills here in terms of being able to hold a nice consistent temperature. And if it wasn't for those gaskets, it wouldn't even be close. Thankfully, after those mods, I'm able to set my temperatures and with very minor adjustments, keep it close to the range that I want. But before that, it was very, very difficult to do that, even with decades of experience on Kamados and fire management. So with all those pros and cons, which would I buy if I was in the market today? Well, if you are going camping and your portability is an absolute must and you're on a budget, it's hard to overlook the value of something like the Char-Griller Akorn. At this price point though, you could go even further and look at something like a Weber Jumbo Joe for a fraction of the cost and even less weight. But having cooked with that many times and my Akorn, the reason I like a Kamado camping is for things that Kamados do really well. I've done low and slow pork butts while we're camping all day. I've mentioned I've done a full packer brisket in the Junior. These are just things that are much, much easier in a Kamado form factor, or getting really, really high temperatures for searing our steak and or cooking a pizza. So if those are the types of things that interest you, then I would lean Kamado versus the Jumbo Joe, and the Akorn is no slouch at its price point for portability. If you're not going to be carrying your grill long distances, then we've got two options to look at between the Big Green Egg MiniMax as well as the Kamado Joe Jr. And I'm going to have to go down to versatility here. Not only are we a fraction of the price, $499 versus, I'll put it up on screen, but it's $700 something for an equally configured MiniMax with a heat deflector stone. This is enough to get extra accessories, things like the soapstone, things like a high heat grill gloves, things like a Blazer grill gun for starting your grill up on the road, and still be under the price point of something like the MiniMax. And the versatility in terms of the rack system that's included with our 2 levels for our deflector stone, the extra height from our fire, the ability for the firebox to hold more charcoal so that we can get through an entire cook like I did with my packer brisket without having to add charcoal, or like today with our chicken and our steak and not running out of charcoal, unlike our Big Green Egg MiniMax, where again, you're burning more fuel at these higher temperatures. It's not that it can't do something like a pork shoulder at 225 for 6 to 8 hours, no problem. But when we're going for chicken and steak at higher temperatures, this is not enough charcoal capacity to be able to get through an all-day cook. So if I was in the market, what would I pick? And especially, I'll hold myself here too. I can only have one, not all three like I'm fortunate enough to have behind me here today. This is a tough choice. There's not enough, again, coming back in the food alone to justify either one of these. And there are accommodations that we can make to take advantage of the strengths and or the weaknesses that each grill has, and you can work around that. For example, Big Green Egg Ceramic Grill Store sells the PSWoo ring, which I originally bought for the Big Green Egg MiniMax, which raises the rack system up and gives us a little bit more clearance. So we can add more charcoal and or increase the distance of the deflector stone to our cooking grid. So these are all things that can be solved with extra time, energy, and in some cases cost, but judging the grills on their stock configuration, if I only had to pick one, which would I pick? Well, I mentioned the Akorn for its portability and camping, which is exactly our use case this summer. We're going to be doing a 3-week road trip. That makes a lot of sense for a road trip, but this is relatively rare. If I look back at the last couple years, there's not that many road trips. So portability, I wouldn't say outweighs the total quality of the grill. So the quality has me looking back to my first 2 small Kamado loves, which is the Big Green Egg MiniMax and the Kamado Joe Jr. And so here I have to look at price and versatility. And the Joe Jr. costing hundreds of dollars less with more versatility, I think, is still the best small Kamado on the market. I hope you really enjoyed this test. If you have any other questions, let me know down in the comments below. I'll try and check that out. And or if you'd like to ask a question directly, be sure to check out my member section where I go live once a month and we can interact in a real-time manner versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today though. I'm James from Smoky Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.